Call the August 7, 2013 State Board of Education meeting to order. Laura, if you could do the roll call, please.
Troy Eller. Present. Dan Alpern.
Present.
David Friedrich.
Present.
Andrew Neal.
Present.
Sarah Bryan. Brad Oliver.
Present.
David Shane.
Present.
Tony Walker. BJ Watt.
Present.
Gary Licker.
Present.
Susan Chambers.
Present. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Concerning the agenda, I'm going to, as the chair, I would like a little flexibility in the order of the discussion items. I'd like to do the AP report first, and then followed by the Turnaround Academies and Lead Partners updates. The first item is the approval of the minutes. And Dan, did you have any additions that you wanted to? I think you submitted some and they were corrected and sent out. Do you have anything further to add?
No, I would just point out to the board, we had a discussion about it because we want to pay attention. On page 3, we talked about put in the record of the minutes there of being clear that we don't change policy through administrative rule before the board reviews the policy. And I just wanted to point that and make sure it was clear to everybody, because that was expressed by the board at the meeting, and we put it in writing that we want the policy followed until we get together to either change or modify the policy. So I wanted to emphasize that, and I appreciate the work we did in the minutes and the collaboration on it.
Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
On that account, you're talking about the advisory opinion from the state superintendent in the minutes. And
yes.
can you restate that point again? And my question is, do you want to make that a motion as part of our agenda item under new business?
Well, I wanted to emphasize that we made it clear, board members were concerned about the precedent that may be set by taking this action before a validation process is complete. So we said, well, there's a review being done of the ISTEP test. And so we sent out a direction to the field that was not in congruence with the policy, and the board set the policy. So we had an administrator decide, well, we're going to change this, and then it turns out when we get the review back, the effect were nil, and so we sent out opposite of what our policy was. And so I just think teachers and principals and everybody in the field needs to know if we have a policy set, we follow it, and that it doesn't change today and tomorrow. And that was expressed, and I wanted to make sure the secretary was clear in the minutes, and I wanted to point that out.
And we've done that.
Yes, I really
So
appreciate
that'll take a change in action by the Department of Education. Is that correct? From their current practice? No. Okay, so state superintendent will follow that? That we will set policy and you will implement?
It's noted in the minutes that we had this discussion, and that's what we're approving the minutes at currently. So,
And the minutes emphasize the need. We have concern about that.
Correct.
That we follow policy. That way, teachers, principals, everybody in the field knows that we're going to follow policy. We don't unilaterally change it.
so noted. All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. The minutes are approved. The next item of business is statement of the chair. I do want to congratulate you, Dan Elser, and your university on opening the medical school. You had great attendance, and it's a wonderful thing for the state of Indiana to have another medical school. I followed the news, saw you on there, and congratulations to your school.
Madam Superintendent, thank you.
You're welcome.
It's a big project.
Sarah, who is absent today as a member of the board, it's her first week of school. I'm envious of that, I can tell you. I miss it greatly, the first day of school with kids. In 34 years, I've had that, and so it's a little anxiety here not being able to do that. I do also appreciate my meetings with some new board members. I met personally with Andrea and Troy and Brad, and I thank you for that informal time to get to know each other. So thank you very much. I also want to add that the department has had a very, very, very fast turnaround from the last meeting to this meeting in preparation of several very important items here. So I just want to keep that in mind as we're actually having dialogue and discussion. If there's more information that you need in order to do your work, please let us know. Also, I will plan to do a recess sometime between 9 and 1 o'clock today. We'll just kind of play that by ear and have a recess at some point. You noticed that we were originally scheduled to have a study session. There were 2 topics on the agenda. One was the reading plan, and the other was outreach. I want to go into a little bit of detail as to my decision for not bringing that to the board today. I actually was sparked by a conversation with Carrie on the phone prior to the last board meeting, and the question was simple. Superintendent Ritz, how do you see your vision of reading assessment fitting into the big picture of assessment? And so I have since thought a lot about that, and I do want reading to be a part of the big picture. It's important that in the state of Indiana we collect reading data on our students, and so we're going to be embarking on a lot of assessment dialogue, and so I'd like to just take this opportunity to at least share my vision of what we're going to be working with assessment, because we're going to be heading into a standards revision that's going to be coupled with assessment. We have a lot of different things to look at. There's a lot of research out there, and there's a lot going on with assessment. So if you would indulge me for a few moments, our current system is one big long test. And CTB McGraw-Hill is here today, and I've had many meetings with them. But in my first meeting with them, I asked for clarification regarding the actual assessment that we are giving. And in that meeting, it's indicated that ISTEP is really one big long test. It has a bottom of grade 3 and has a ceiling of grade 8. Now, the state of Indiana, if we chose to give it that way to, for instance, to 5th graders, then 5th grade teachers might know that they have students that are performing at an 8th grade mathematical level or a 3rd grade mathematical level in addition to the 5th. They would have a broader spectrum of what they know about their students. In the state of Indiana, we give the ISTEP in grade levels. So taking the 5th grade example, that test has a 5th grade bottom and a 5th grade ceiling. So the information that we know about our students is just that. That's what we know. There are many adaptive growth model assessments on the market now doing absolutely wonderful things, and there are things being developed as we speak, even regarding college and career readiness assessments, in which the bottom of the test is pre-K, and there is no ceiling. So when you give the test, it has thousands of banks of questions. I think that was presented in Carrie's presentation last week, in which students actually we can know their level of performance. At the same time, when we give those types of adaptive assessments, we also know where students are performing at or above level. So we get 2 pieces of information that are very vital to what we do in our schools. So I just want to let you know that I look forward to having dialogue with the board, researching what's out there, what's going on, not only talking about the type of assessment we might want to do, because since ISTEP was around, things have greatly evolved. So we just want to have that dialogue, and I want reading to be a separate piece of that. I actually want to be sure that we collect reading data in the state of Indiana, which we do not currently do, except for the pass-fail test at grade 3. When we go through that entire process, that will probably prompt repromulgation of the reading plan. And at that point, we'll take a look at that. But we have work to do before 2015-16, and I look forward to doing that. In terms of outreach, it was my goal to have a presentation today on outreach, because outreach is a whole different approach to service and delivering service to our schools at the grassroots level. And the board, many members of the board have heard me talk about this before, but I also, my assistant superintendent actually is not here today, and I wanted her in specific to meet you and be able to do the presentation. She is working with a school that is down in Evansville, Glenwood, I think the school was brought up in the last meeting, and she had already scheduled a meeting for this day, and so she's doing her important work. So we will bring that to you probably in September. So those are my statements of the chair. I do know we had several board members attend some conferences. So I don't know if we have board members who want to report, because now we are ready for board member comments and reports. I know Carrie and BJ, I know you
BJ
attended.
and I had the opportunity
Yeah.
to go to the NASB new member conference, and then BJ stayed on for the full NASB conference, and Tony, I went home, Tony didn't, and joined him for the full conference. And we've talked about it. It was, the new member conference was very beneficial. They spent 2 days talking about different national trends and national policies in a very unbiased way. Their position is that they're not taking sides on issues. They're educating board members to make good decisions. And so we found it very beneficial. You know, they're having an upcoming, and they don't have a date yet, but Common Core Summit, same thing, we can send 2 people. I just want us to, we've paid to be members of this. We've paid for their information and expertise, and want to make sure someone, you know, we take as much part in that as we can. We use that information that they've got for us. So, BJ.
And it was interesting to see that the questions that we have, maybe, we're not unique in Indiana. I mean, when they asked for, you know, what are your hot buttons in your states, everyone was kind of identical, and they really applauded you and the governor, saying, we love how you guys are saying, okay, Common Core, we're going to look at it again, we're going to make sure that this is correct. And I talked with 2 guys from Utah, and they said, I wish we would have done that, because, and they said, and we support Common Core, but I feel like we rushed it a little bit, and I think we may have lost a little trust. But they were very complimentary of Indiana. It was neat for me to, when they put us into small groups, they started with a problem or not a problem, an issue in the beginning, and we worked through creating policy, which was very, to see all of the different points of view from other state board members from other states, because we were obviously split. There was no two members from one state together. So it was interesting to see something from the beginning to the end and how other states work through it. So yeah, it's very, very beneficial. If you get the chance to go, I would highly recommend it.
Any other comments from the boards?
Less than 2 weeks ago, we had our board meeting, and that provided DOE staff with about a week to get information to us. And I expressed privately to Glenn on Monday, thank you for getting all that information to us, and just want to be sure that DOE staff understand we really appreciate the good work they do every day for us, but in particular, within a very short time span, providing all the information that they did get to us. So thank you, Superintendent.
You're welcome. Thank you. My staff is very hardworking. All right. Any other comments from the board? Now we have public general comments, and when people sign up to comment, they sign up on whether they're going to be speaking about a very specific item on the agenda, or whether they're going to be doing a general comment. And so at this time, we have one general comment. Yeah, it looks like we have one general comment. Is it Talia Reed? Is there a Talia Reed? Oh, there you go. Go ahead and come to the microphone, dear. Sorry. Didn't see you standing.
Members of the board, thank you for your service to our state's children. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you today, to share with you how the policies you're dealing with affect the daily education of my students. My name's Talia Reed, and I teach 8th grade language arts at Northwood Middle School in Wakarusa. I feel so passionately enthusiastic about Indiana's rigorous reforms that have been made in the last few years that it was worth it to me to come here from northern Indiana, drive 2.5 hours to speak with you today. In addition to teaching general English, I also teach an English remediation class to help students who have not passed ISTEP. This was something we piloted last year. If my 8th graders did not pass the ISTEP test in 7th grade, they're put into a special class where we work specifically to build the skills that they need in order to be successful in the 8th grade when they take the 8th grade test. Many of the students who end up in my remediation class have reading levels that are far below what is appropriate for 8th graders, which causes them to struggle in nearly all of their academic areas, and continually they fail to pass the ISTEP test yearly. This is why, although I am a secondary teacher, I feel the iRead policies currently in place are a crucial tool that guides teachers' focus on the fundamental necessity to prepare each and every student for a lifelong of success. By having the reading skills they'll need in 3rd grade, they'll have the skills they need in 8th grade, in every grade, and continuously throughout their life. Had my remediation students gained the foundation of grade-level reading skills early on rather than slipping through the cracks and continuously struggling, there would be little, if any, need for our remediation class. Teachers should be evaluated based on multiple measures. But the most important, the primary role of a teacher is creating results of student learning. Student learning must be a significant factor of every teacher's evaluation. Next week, I will be opening my classroom door and I'll be beginning a new academic year. However, I will be doing so without the data of my students' growth from last year. Not only will I not know how, my incoming 8th graders did on their 7th grade ISTEP scores, but I don't know how well I did last year as a teacher because I don't have that data either. If the strategies I used, if they were effective or not. And I will be at a loss as to the student learning and achievement of my new students. This data is needed to guide my instruction. Additionally, without knowing which students are in need of remediation, my school's administration is at a loss as to how to fill the remediation classes. All of the back and forth and the moving of targets results in an overlost time of instruction. We have 180 days, and without this data, without this information, those days become diminished. Time is wasted with the backtracking and the waiting. I urge the board to move the target whereby teachers were told they'd be evaluated and to have faith that our great Indiana educators are up to the task, and we welcome the challenges of those policies previously implemented. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. We are now ready for best practices and innovations, and we have deferred that for the August meeting. School's just now beginning, but we will resume that in September and hear about great things. Yes, David? No, there are no other public comments on the list that are general. We do have some public comments for some items later on.
I apologize missing the last meeting, but maybe I have a gap. When will the data from last year be available to teachers starting this year?
We are hoping to get out the information regarding student scores at the end of August. And I do have an ISTEP update to give to you, as well as CTB McGraw-Hill representative is here. So we will address those.
Thank you.
And thank you, Ms. Reed, for all your work you do with kids. Thank you very much. I agree with your sentiments on the importance of reading, especially reading by grade 3. And I also agree that teachers are accountable and should be accountable for the learning that happens in their classroom, as well as the actual process of teaching that they do every single day. Thank you very much for your comments. At this time, we are beginning discussion. We're going to begin with the 2012 Annual AP Report. And Dr. Leslie Fadum, who works for the Department of Education, will be walking you through that report that you did receive.
Good morning. I'm Leslie Fadum, Assistant Director for College and Career Readiness Curriculum. And I drafted our 2012 Indiana Advanced Placement Performance Report. Advanced Placement, or AP, is a research-backed method to facilitate student participation and success through delivery of college-level courses and corresponding exams in the high school setting to qualified high school students. Students who demonstrate success in AP are predicted to outperform their peers who did not take or have not had success in these courses. The current research suggests that passing or qualifying on an exam, scoring a 3, 4, or 5 on a scale of 1 to 5, is predictive of greater college success. The Indiana Department of Education has committed to expanding participation and success in AP exams in order to have the highest percentage of college-educated citizens in the United States. So this report contains information and/or analyses on each of the following items. There's a report on the NIMSI, which stands for National Math and Science Initiatives, AP Teacher Training and Incentive Program that started in 2012. We're comparing 2012 Indiana AP growth to 2012 national average AP growth, 2012 Indiana AP growth compared to 2011 Indiana AP results, current trends in Indiana's AP course participation and passage rates, 2012 state and federal funding, AP teacher and educator training, and the IDOE AP action plan. So if you look on page 3, I've summarized some of the major findings. Indiana continues to improve and to outpace the nation in terms of AP participation and success. And I broke it down again by demographics and categories that the AP collects data on. Are there any particular questions? It's a 33-page report, so.
I read it, and I really appreciate the presentation and the information. Did it a couple different ways, but after you read the text, it's nice to have charts and all, so thank you very much. But it's a visual of being on the right track, isn't it? I mean, every educator contributes to this, the educators that participate in AP, but to improve passage rates and our ranking against other states says something about the educators and clear goals. We had clear goals around this. We had a strategy, and we followed it, and now you see improvement. And I think it's very instructive for everybody, our last speaker, what educators can do. This is the board, very, very clear goals, very clear strategy. And we're getting good results, and I like the way you lined it out here. It's something, and a lot of people have been on the board a while. We should, take a look at that and remember it and have it seared in our mind as we approach things in the future. So quality report, good news, and I just couldn't let it go by when I read it. I thought What a wonderful accomplishment, huh?
I agree. And I'll be interested, and I'm sure you will be too, to see what happened in 2013. We just finished those rounds of exams, and so I don't have the data yet, but I believe that we did probably increase in participation and success. So, yes.
Quick question, I'd like to know a little bit too about how that will be communicated out widely in terms of the improvements, because it is significant. I mean, this is 7 years consecutively of growth, and one of the things I was encouraged by was the slight gains we're seeing with low-income students. Those are things I think we need to get out there to help people understand. Exactly, to help understand Indiana is truly leading in this area. I'm just curious how the DOE will continue to communicate that. I know you will, but I would love to hear a little bit about the plan on that.
Well, I'm sure that the superintendent will put that in her DOE doc. We will release some press releases. I think we did already release a press release pertaining to the 2012 AP recognition event that we just held in June, where 34 schools were celebrated for their success in AP access and/or participation. So we'll continue to push out the good news, even if it is a year late. Unfortunately, we have to work under that kind of a schedule. So, but still, yeah.
My appreciation of those, because I think it's definitely showing we're moving on the right track.
Well, one thing about the AP program that is especially wonderful is that the teachers do receive significant professional development in order to teach those courses, which of course is a huge factor in their success. And College Board is a wonderful partner. They work very, very hard to help the programs be successful. And so we're hoping to continue our great relationship with them.
Thanks for your comprehensive report. I was struck by two things in particular. One was that we lead the nation in the number of students taking the AP exams, and so as my colleagues pointed out, that is a credit to our school leaders, school teachers. The other quote that I took from your report is Indiana's Hispanic students show tremendous growth over all national averages in the number of students taking AP exams, the total number of exams taken, and the number of passing scores. And if you look at that particular chart, it was tremendous how the Hispanic population really grew way over the national averages. How do you explain that in 2012 the Hispanic student population did really well? Is there any kind of an explanation?
Well, I think one explanation could be that we had more Hispanic students in that population of students taking the exams. To be honest, I didn't have the opportunity to really analyze like the back data from previous years to compare, for instance, the number of students each year. But that would be one of my guesses. And then the fact that there were more AP courses and exams being offered in the different schools because of the requirement now that schools offer AP courses. So, but yeah, when I was kind of crunching the numbers, I was quite surprised and gratified to see that myself.
Is there anything that you need more from us as a state board to support your great work, obviously?
Money would be nice.
Well, I have my checkbook, but there's only $5 left.
Well, well, the AP program is a wonderful program. It is not an inexpensive program, and so in my little report on the funding, I did allude to the fact that we do not anticipate getting the same level of support from the feds with respect to low-income student participation, and there's not been a subsequent increase in the funding relative to the increase in the provision of the courses and exams. So,
And I believe, if you feel like I may interject, those monies were targeted at students to be sure that they were getting access. And so that really can account for some of the rise in the Hispanic population and the minority populations in general, because that's what that money was used for. But as she noted in the report, you know, the one area of concern that I had was just that money's not going to be available. So it's going to be more onus on the state to try to get that going and get that, you know, get that happening, because the tests themselves cost. You know, there's a cost to them. And so that's of concern to us as a department. So actually, the board going forward, any support that we can get regarding any type of funding that we might have for that. I mean, she's correct in saying money for that very aspect. After the report was released, I've already had talk with my communications department. We have Facebook pieces that will be going into place. You know, we tend to talk about great news that we have in Indiana. So plans are in place.
One final comment on a personal note. I have 2 children that benefited from AP. And in particular, one through the AP courses at Penn High School up in northern Indiana, thanks to the first speaker, by the way. He was able to graduate from the engineering program at Purdue in 3 years. And that is something that's a benefit that's not reported in your report, but I would urge you to take a look at the number of students in Indiana who are able to graduate 3 years, 3.5 years because of the AP classes. That certainly helps financially, who's your parents and who's your children. And it's an interesting statistic that if you can ferret that out in the future, I'd really appreciate that.
Well, I'll definitely try to do so.
Thank you.
Yes, of course.
You handed out these maps, and they create a question in my mind, and maybe you've done it, maybe, I don't know what the barrier should be to do it. It'd be interesting to juxtapose like socioeconomic counties or areas, and to find out where there's difference in participation and or passage. And so if you had a like socioeconomic situation, one county and another one, and they're having different results, it'd be interesting to know why or what might be the differences approaches of the boards and superintendent principals in those areas, not for the purpose ultimately of saying, you know, we found a county a little bit like you or an area, and they're getting a lot better results. Here's some things, and there was like a best practice cookbook that might be interesting to understand that. Because, or maybe you have a like socioeconomic that's high in both counties, and one gets very different results. What are they doing? Is that something that's been done, and what would be the barriers to getting something like that done?
I don't think that it has been done. I think it's quite feasible to do it because we do have demographic data on all of our schools. And so that's something that we probably could compile an analysis of. And it may well be due to factors such as how long the schools have had AP courses in their curriculum.
We'd be open to whatever
Right.
we found.
Mhm. Well, I'll certainly
Yeah, I mean,
try to put that into the
I'm
2013
sure you
report.
have a full schedule, but I think there would be some learnings in there for us, and especially for the field, you know, so.
Perhaps we can incorporate something like that with the 2013.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leslie.
You're welcome, ma'am.
Now, the next item on the agenda is Turnaround Academies and Lead Partner updates. And we want to have a very, very full discussion about this. And so this is a piece of information that our department just finished. So you are just now receiving it. We're going to take a really slow time actually talking about the lead partners. The Turnaround Academies, you've had information in the last several months, but we want to focus today on lead partner updates. And so I think Danielle, you're going to be, Danielle Shockey, who is the Deputy Superintendent, will be leading this conversation, along with, is Cindy Hurst going to participate as well
Yes,
from our Title I?
she's here in the audience, and I think
Correct.
at any time, there could be questions that I think you yourself, Superintendent, or Cindy Hurst may want to chime in on, but I'm going to go ahead and take the lead today if that's pleasing to the board.
We're going to talk about a couple of items. We're going to talk about the lead partners, but we're also going to talk about the possibility of lead partners for schools that may be entering their 6th year. So we're going to talk about 2 processes here today, of which we're going to be doing. As I said, we're going to go through this very slowly so that you can get all your questions answered, because we also have an action item on this today as well.
Correct.
Thank you, Danielle.
No problem, and I thank you for the opportunity to present, and also for David's initial comment and acknowledging that some of this work really took us the entire time. And to the superintendent's point, this presentation today had us meeting with each of the lead partners, each of the leaderships in the school districts, to compile, and in the PowerPoint, and that's why there's a PowerPoint for this, their comments on their partnerships and their goals to date. So I do appreciate that.
Lead partners speak today?
They're in the, some of them we believe are in the audience if need to be called on. Yes.
Thank you.
So first, I'm going to give you some background information. Again, many people are new in the room today, so I want to share some background. I'm just going to be reading from some of this. You have it on the memorandum from me to you. In 2011, John Marshall High School, George Washington Community High School, and Broad Ripple Magnet High School all entered into their 6th consecutive year in the lowest performance and improvement category, which activated state board intervention pursuant to Indiana Code 20-31-9-4. The Indiana State Board of Education chose to implement the intervention of assigning a lead partner to each of the aforementioned schools. John Marshall was assigned Cambion / AKA Voyager. Broad Ripple was assigned Scholastic. George Washington was assigned Wireless Generation, also known as Amplify. Additionally, the board assigned the New Teacher Project to work with George Washington and Broad Ripple to train administrators on the RISE evaluation system. During the 2011-2012 school year, each lead partner contracted with the Indiana Department of Education. The department paid for the 2011-2012 contracts entirely with Title I school improvement grants, the 1003G administrative funds. This funding source was available for the department because all 3 schools assigned lead partners had been granted 1003G funds. During the 12-13 school year, payments to the lead partners from the department continued to be made from Title I School Improvement Grants 1003G administrative funds, and were supplemented by each school utilizing their own 1003G grant monies respectively. The contracts between the department and the lead partners expire on August 31st, 2013 and September 1st, 2013. The contracts include the option for renewal by mutual agreement of the parties in 1-year increments for up to 2 additional years following the expiration of the initial term. Some background is necessary, so this next paragraph is regarding Title I school improvement grants. School improvement grants, also known as SIG grants, are part of the Title I program. SIG grants, which include 1003A and 1003G, require frequent monitoring by the department. Both desktop and on-site monitoring occur through the school year. The department looks at student achievement data as well as other data related to goals of the school's plan. For example, professional development activities, participation, parent involvement activities, student indicators such as attendance, suspension, expulsions, and so forth. Data that is both quantitative and qualitative helps inform the department of the progress of the schools, as well as identified challenges that must be addressed. Monitoring of the 1003A schools occurs at least twice during the school year by the department, and monitoring for the 1003G schools occurred during at least 3 times during the school year, with additional monthly as needed support provided to the schools. Reports for each school are compiled and issued by the department. Detailed information regarding monitoring, including protocol and sample reports, is available on our website. And I might add here, too, that monthly you've been receiving reports as a state board from each of the lead partners on their goals and their data thus far. All 3 schools, John Marshall, all 3 schools have been awarded 1003G funds. However, Broad Ripple is the only school with 1003G funds left because John Marshall and George Washington have both exceeded their 3-year grant term. John Marshall was granted 1003A funds for the 2013 school year, and that information is important, and later on we might have some questions regarding that.
And let's pause here for a moment.
Sure.
Just with the background information. Does anybody have any questions about what we did already, what happened. Okay, thank you, Danielle.
Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and start using the slides here to talk about the grant and performance review process that the department has conducted. The department's contract with each lead partner included a scope of work for the 12-13 school year that outlined the lead partner's goals. The first lead partner I'm going to talk about is the New Teacher Project, and they were partnered again with Broad Ripple and George Washington High School, specifically for the RISE training with their administrative teams and teachers. The New Teacher Project goals included the four, actually let me advance this slide here. This is new for me. These were their goals. One was to support schools with the IPS transition to the RISE. Goal 2 was to provide direct coaching to administrators and ensure accurate evaluations and actionable next steps that are delivered to teachers. Goal 3 was to monitor evaluation processes through weekly, bi-monthly, and semi-annual checks for progress and assess the effectiveness of teacher development plans. Their fourth goal was to assess the instructional culture at each school during the first semester and then again at the end of the school year. The goals overview, and this is based on the State Board of Education reports, in addition to the contract language, there was also things that they talked about, and these are their overviews, which was accurate evaluations, quality of feedback, instructional culture, and quality of service. The feedback, so this is where in the last couple of weeks we've met with each of these partners in each of these schools, and we've asked the questions, how has this been for you? And this is to the school leadership. And these are in quotes and probably important to note. The New Teacher Project is on track to meet all of its goals at Broad Ripple Magnet High School and George Washington Community High School. And progress measured during the 1003G site visits in May indicated a strong partnership with the New Teacher Project. I'm going to move into the next partnership, which is Voyager John Marshall. Voyager's goals for the 2013 school year included the following: increase leadership effectiveness, increase student self-management responsibility and positive leadership, improve instructional quality and outcomes, increase student graduation without waivers, improve parent-community partnerships, strengthen the impact of district and school resources. Voyager provided the department and the board with reports on strengthening overall school operations, climate relationships, and social emotional health, instructional quality, professional development, and evaluation. A review of Voyager's report to the board shows that Voyager either met or was on track to meet all of its goals for the first semester of the 12-13 school year, and that second semester results were promising but still pending. Voyager stated in its update at the July 19th, 2013 board meeting that they had December 12 benchmarks were met and final end-of-the-year benchmarks are pending. The department visited John Marshall in May for our 1003G site visit and found the progress measured indicated that the support received by John Marshall from Voyager has been successful, and both parties wish to continue in their work together moving forward in the 13-14 school year. And these are some quotes from the Voyager feedback, which I have indicated in what I just read. The next partnership is the Scholastic Partnership with Broad Ripple. Scholastic's goals for the 12-13 school year included the following: school-wide professional development to improve instruction with a focus on gradual release and internal capacity building. Continue implementing literacy interventions with high fidelity. Implement a research-based math intervention program to support algebra readiness. Deepen building-wide leadership capacity and ongoing project management and executive coaching support. Scholastic provided the department and the board with reports on student attendance, discipline, leading indicators, initiative-specific indicators, and staff culture. Based on the update provided by Scholastic at the July 19, 2013 state board meeting, Scholastic had success in meeting all of its goals for Broad Ripple. Additionally, both reports to the department and the board and the department's review of the 1003G indicators show improved attendance, increased professional development time, and a decrease in student suspensions during the school year. The department visited Broad Ripple in May for our 1003G site visit and found that progress measures indicated a strong partnership between Scholastic and Broad Ripple. The final partnership is Amplify and George Washington. And the goals for their 12-13 school year included these: continue professional learning communities organized by content and grade level. Continue school leadership PLCs and individual administrator coaching. Continue individual teacher coaching with differentiated support. Continue to provide targeted professional development. Assist in implementing a response to intervention program, and increase cross-partner collaboration. Amplify provided the department and the board with reports on 5 priorities outlined here: increased student engagement rigor, building teachers' capacity to meet education needs of all ELL students, assist in the implementation of an RTI program, improve reading and writing across all content areas in all grades, and improve student performance by supporting leaders in managing school change. A review of Amplify's report to the board shows that Amplify was on track, but struggled to meet a majority of its goals. Based on the update provided by Amplify at the July 19, 2013 board meeting, the teachers at George Washington grew in many priority areas during the school year based on their report. Our next steps for the 2013-14 school year, I'd like to read each of them by school and by partner separately, if you don't mind. For the new teacher project, which was partnered with Broad Ripple and George Washington, we'd like to say that IPS has entered into a contract with the new teacher project to provide evaluation training to all administrators of IPS schools, including continuing at Broad Ripple and George Washington. The services that will be provided by the new teacher project pursuant to its contract with IPS would be similar in nature to those that have already been provided to George Washington and Broad Ripple in the previous year through your intervention. Voyager and John Marshall, in a partnership, IPS has already entered into a contract with Voyager to continue as their lead partner work for the 2013-14 school year. IPS has planned to fund the contract with Voyager in its entirety through its 1003A grant dollars. Voyager and John Marshall have collaboratively developed a clear plan to move John Marshall forward. The 13-14 school year will be on instructional support. The contract between Voyager and IPS includes higher levels of accountability with a focus on summative results at least 2 times per year and ongoing formative assessments and data analysis. Scholastic and Broad Ripple. In this partnership, IPS has established a verbal agreement with Scholastic to continue lead partner work for the 13-14 school year. IPS has planned to fund the contract with Scholastic in its entirety through their 1003G grant funds. Scholastic and Broad Ripple have collectively developed a plan that builds sustainability into the partner work by turning over more responsibility to Broad Ripple and IPS for the 13-14 school year. The contract between Scholastic and IPS will include higher levels of accountability with a focus on summative results no less than 2 times per year and ongoing formative assessment and data analysis. The final partnership with Amplify and George Washington. George Washington received the letter grade of a C for the 2011-12 school year, removing it from the lowest performance category of improvement. Additionally, George Washington has had a strong community partnership base with over 75 community partners regularly working with and investing in the school. George Washington has established a strong partnership with IUPUI, in which IUPUI provides George Washington with additional university staff and pre-service students on site and working in the classrooms. All of these partnerships will continue for the 13-14 school year. The department. As of January 2013, the department has added the Outreach Division of School Improvement, which is committed to providing grassroots levels of supports and intervention to Indiana schools. Outreach coordinators in the Indianapolis region will be assigned to Broad Ripple, John Marshall, and George Washington. The outreach team will study school data and school improvement plans and assist with providing the schools with resources and supports needed to improve student academic growth and achievement through regular and ongoing site visits in collaboration with our Title I team who provided the 1003 grants to these schools. Our recommendations based on this report include the new teacher project, Broad Ripple and George Washington relationship. The department recommends that the board discontinue the use of the new teacher project in the lead partner initiatives for Broad Ripple and George Washington. In connection with the discontinuation of this intervention, the department's recommendation is the non-renewal of its contracts with the new teacher project for the 2013-14 school year. This recommendation is made due to the new teacher project's overall success in training the administrators during the 12-13 school year, as well as the fact that IPS has secured this contract on their own to provide these same services to the administrators district-wide. The Voyager, John Marshall, Scholastic, Broad Ripple partnerships. The department recommends that the board continue to intervene at John Marshall and use Voyager in lead partner initiatives for John Marshall, and to continue to intervene at Broad Ripple and use Scholastic in the lead partner initiatives with Broad Ripple. However, the department does not recommend a renewal of its contracts with Voyager and Scholastic. The department recognizes the progress and success of John Marshall and Broad Ripple due to Voyager and Scholastic respectively, and would like to see John Marshall and Broad Ripple further succeed. The department also recognizes that IPS plans to fully fund the contract with Voyager through their 1003A funds and contract with Scholastic through their 1003G funds. Through monitoring devices already built into the 1003A and 1003G, the department can assure that IPS does not cancel its contract with Voyager or Scholastic during the 13-14 school year, and that the lead partners meet performance goals. In order to enforce higher levels of accountability and ensure monitoring requirements, the department recommends that we enter into an MOU with each of these lead partners. Amplify and George Washington. The department recommends that the board discontinue any interventions at George Washington. In connection with this discontinuation of intervention, the department recommends the non-renewal of contract with Amplify for the 13-14 school year. This recommendation is made due to George Washington's growth and the strong support that George Washington receives from its community and the department's outreach division. The department believes that George Washington will be capable of continuing to grow and develop its program without additional intervention of a lead partner for the 13-14 school year. I would like to close, obviously you can have as many questions as you like about this report I just made, but then I'd like to make comment to our forthcoming schools, which may fall into the 6th consecutive year category.
Why don't we do that in a moment?
Sure, I can do that momentarily.
I want to add my thoughts to this report, that this board took action to actually get lead partners, but then the schools themselves have actually taken on the responsibility without any prodding whatsoever to actually incur the cost through their own grants that they secured to continue these partnerships that you have alluded to, Voyager and Scholastic. To me, as an educator, that's exciting news, that the schools themselves are taking the ownership and recognize the assistance that they got from these partners and are continuing those. And that the department still also is able to fully monitor that entire process because the money is from the SIG grants.
Correct.
Questions from the board? Yes.
Would you share the accountability dashboard and specific criteria that are used to continue the evaluation of these schools to ensure that they are making progress?
Sure, and when you say accountability dashboard, maybe tell me a little bit more what you're referring to, what kind of data points we're receiving?
What kind
and
of
so
data
forth?
points, measurable, observable criteria?
Sure, okay. And I'm going to call up Cindy Hurst for that. She actually does the on-site and desktop monitoring, and let her speak to what are those specific data points, if you don't mind.
Sure.
In fact, the department probably has greater monitoring capabilities and responsibilities when it is under the process of the Title I auspices.
Good morning.
Morning.
To answer your question with regards to the kind of data points we collect, the schools within the terms of their SIG grants, their little g grants, determine what kinds of progress monitoring they will do. And so when we visit on-site, they may have, if they have in-house assessments or something they use, we look at those, we talk about those. We actually just finished our renewal process, and so through that application, we looked at several leading indicators which are required per the grant, and those include things like attendance rate, and so we look for improvement in attendance. We look at a decrease in expulsions or suspensions. We look at time. We look at to see whether or not they've been able to extend the day or the year, and so the minutes of instructional time have increased. There's also a piece where we do look at ECA I-STEP data. Because we didn't have that available, we haven't been able to look at that yet for the end of the year. Those are the kind of data points we are looking at.
So student achievement
Yes.
will be one of the key criterions?
Yes.
And you track that how often? What's the timeline for doing that? Is that continuous, or is that annual basis?
Sure. So we do the monitoring visits 3 times a year. Those are formal visits. Plus we have monthly phone calls and then as needed communication, maybe through email or such. For sure during the on-site monitoring, the schools all are prepared. They present to us data. Like I said, it might be some of their progress monitoring data that they've used in-house. If probably in the fall, the first thing we will look at, we will be able to look at ISTEP scores and ECA data. And so we can look at that student growth. And that's always part of the conversation because ultimately that's what the grant is supposed to be used for. It's to increase student achievement. And so we're looking at their benchmarks and then we're also looking at state benchmarks.
Student achievement declines. Is that something that you would come back before the board and make a presentation, maybe on an annual basis? Because if we're turning it over back to the school, I certainly trust the teachers and administration of that school. But if the achievement scores are declining, I think we would want at least an alert that something is going on there. Is that something that you plan to do?
Do you know, in the past, as part of the SIG monitoring, the little g monitoring, in fact, in 1 year, we did see a decline in one of our schools receiving the grant, and they lost their grant award. So they had it for 1 year, and they were discontinued for the next 2 years. So yes, we do look at that, take that seriously. For this year, moving forward, because we don't have that data, we will move forward and continue to fund all of our SIG commitments. But with the help of outreach and through a monitoring process, we're going to talk about that. And if we see a decline, especially something severe or something that happens over time, in other words, we see a decrease continually and we don't ever see an increase, that would be a cause for alarm and that would put their grant in jeopardy.
We'll come back to us.
We could do that, yes.
Thank you.
I might also add that the outreach divisions that we have in place, we've hired our coordinators who live within the regions in which they serve. So they will know their school improvement plans forwards and backwards, and they will be able to know their SIG grant plans and have a ground on, have a heads up right there all the time. So it is our plan at the department to have extensive monitoring of the schools that are in the F categories, any of them. And as noted in our awarding of the SIG grants, we have made very specific priority as to the amount of money that we gave them and the amount of monitoring that is going to be needed to make sure that that happens. I look forward to the board hearing from outreach in September because I think you're going to be just wowed with the support we're going to be able to put right there on the ground, not in terms of building partnerships, but making sure we're doing effective monitoring. Thank you for your comments, David. Yes, Andrea?
Are the lead partners comfortable with all of these recommendations?
Yes, in fact, they all think this is they actually entered into the partnerships and the agreements with the districts in advance of us asking the question. Because if you think about how those 1003G applications were submitted to us, they had to already be thinking, what are we going to do for next year? So they already had those conversations with those lead partners to say, this has been tremendous in most cases. We want to continue. Can we make you our basis for our grant application for our 1003G dollars moving forward? And so they had already had those conversations, and they're all very happy.
Keep in mind, we are doing an MOU, where we are recommending doing an MOU in addition to their contractual obligations with the school districts for Scholastic and Voyager. Yes, Brian.
Just a clarifying question. My understanding is that with the way the statute is written, it's in their 6th consecutive year that it requires that the board take some kind of action.
Correct.
So that brings with it a certain extra layer of accountability. This recommendation, if I'm understanding, basically would remove it from the board and send it back under Title I monitoring. And I'm hearing a lot of comments about funding. Is it? I'm not saying that you're expressing this, but is the implication that somehow that they can't fund the partnership through their Title I SIG sections?
No,
unless
it's
it moves
the
back?
opposite. They actually did fund it through their 1003G.
They
They did fund it. What had happened previously with the original partnership agreement that we entered into, which was through your recommendation, we have additional administrative funds that come with that. So in that first year, they hadn't had the opportunity to plan for it in their 1003G applications. So when the board took action to intervene, they hadn't set aside, if you will, dollars to fund those lead partners. So we took out of our administrative funds and funded those lead partnerships. So now that we're in the next year, they have recognized the benefit to having those lead partners and said, we are funding it. So that's kind of the change and why that changes the contract relationship a little bit.
And forgive me for asking a follow-up on this, because I'm absorbing this for the
Right,
last 15 minutes.
I'm trying to explain as best I understand,
You're doing
too.
great.
We're good.
But here's my question, and it's cultural. I mean, one of the things we know about culture is and they're clearly heading on the right path.
Correct.
But from the research standpoint, if that gets celebrated too quickly, we lose a sense of urgency. What I'm concerned about is we remove the level of board oversight to the lead partners. And I'm not saying that DOE can't monitor that. I'm concerned, how do we keep the level of urgency there so we don't drop right back into where we were?
Sure,
and
and
be
if
right
I
back
might make
here.
a recommendation, maybe the MOU is written
Right.
with continued lead partner monthly updates to the state board.
Yeah, we're not wanting to take away oversight, or take away that with Voyager and Scholastic. We actually are insisting that we have an MOU that coincides with that. I think the difference that we're bringing to you today is there's no need, there's a difference in the contractual obligations. We don't need to fund it from the department's point of view. And the purpose of the contract was to fund it, and to have oversight, like you just mentioned, Brad. So we are suggesting, recommending actually, that we have oversight, continued oversight, with Voyager and John Marshall and Scholastic and Broad Ripple. We are recommending discontinuation with George Washington because they level. And then the new teacher project, which was really an additional piece that they put in, has been accomplished for that school, but IPS is wanting to expand it and do it for all their administrators. So really, this has been like such an in-depth review, but the contractual obligations in terms of the money, the school now has taken on that contractual obligation, but as you so eloquently stated, we want to be sure that we've got the oversight as the board regarding these two contracts. And so that's why the MOU is there as well.
And it actually creates, kind of, the superintendent pointed out, this creates a stronger layer of monitoring, if you will, because we'll be monitoring through their grant
2 ways.
application, which gave them the dollars to be in the partnership, as well as the MOU on top of it. So I think, to your point, we're actually continuing and maybe even strengthening the monitoring. And then also, Mr. Oliver, I would also add too that I feel that the research would say that the fact that they are taking onus of this goes to show that they're looking for a way to embed it into their culture. And so I appreciate that.
I don't disagree with that. That we know the timing is critical, crucial. They're at a critical point. They're moving in the right direction. And my
Correct.
only thing I'm raising is, I'm not questioning where you're going. I
Sure.
think that's where we absolutely need to be heading. Is it a year too early? And that's all I'm asking.
Okay, very good. And that, to my recommendation, I would say then the MOU we write with specific regard to some thoughts you may have on that.
Yes, David?
2 questions. Point of order. Are we in discussion or are we in
We are in
decision?
discussion.
So we're not making any
No,
decisions
we are
today?
not. We're in
Then-
discussion.
Then the fact that we would not do anything means we are not accepting your recommendations here today, to Brad's point, because we're not going to discontinue. And I'm buttressed in that concern. We got into this because of a statutory provision created by the legislature to say the board needed to intervene when schools got in a certain point of non-performance, long non-performance. We now got into that. In these school situations, we're in a lead partner mode. I'm grateful that IPS is seeing the value of the lead partners. I'm grateful that there's funding flows that continue. But that gratitude doesn't give me a factual basis to reach a conclusion. I'm echoing Brad here, to reach a conclusion that the board should let go at this point in time. So I get nervous about the word discontinue, the intervention.
Well,
It may just be a quibble,
I think
but it's an
it's-
important quibble to me.
I think it's the distinction of legal, an MOU's weight versus a contract's weight, and to the superintendent's point of a contract, and Bernice, I'm looking to you for, I'm a little out of my field here, but with a contract, there's the financial relationship, and because we're not funding it, they are funding it, the MOU holds a similar weight to a contract, so we're discontinuing a contract, but wanting to enter into an MOU.
Yeah, maybe we should have Bernice speak to the piece, because I don't want anybody here at the board to think that we're not wanting to have the lead in this, because that's not true, like, at all. In fact, just the opposite. It's a matter of where the funding is coming from as to the contractual obligation piece that we're talking about. So we may need to have a further dialogue about that, but Bernice, why don't you go ahead and make some comments?
Danielle did a great intro. And David, to your question about contract versus MOU, Obviously, we all know with a contract, there needs to be consideration. Consideration is often in the form of money. The department is not bringing any money, if I could finish, to the table in this situation. My thought in terms of an MOU is creating that relationship where there is submission by the lead partner to participating and reporting to both the department and the board. It's my idea to craft the MOU by taking I don't think we have an example of the contract with us, but there are several deliverables and reports that are set out in the contract or documents attached to the contracts, and I would like to use those documents to populate the MOU. So supervision isn't changed, but the fact that the dollars are being paid for and provided by the school is what has changed.
I guess I'm a little concerned about the timelines of it, because and I may have us wrong, but my understanding is the contracts expire at the end of this month.
Yes.
The board will not meet again unless there's another meeting established. So how does the board review an MOU that we haven't seen prior to hitting a deadline on a contract? I'm worried about that gap, and I haven't heard anybody explain that yet.
Well,
I'm going to defer to the members of the board, okay? Because this is the first time I have done this as a superintendent, and I've not reviewed the minutes, but I'm not sure that your action here was predicated on actually seeing the contracts. Usually, I think you take action on whether you're going to do the lead partner or not, and then the contract is established with the department. Am I right, wrong? I don't know.
The board owns the obligation to oversee these schools.
And the contract, I know, is written with the department, so I don't know which happens first.
And up to this moment, the department responds to the board's instruction. So if the board does not end a lead partner relationship, for example, I think to David's point, because we haven't seen evidence of sustainability,
Right.
then the lead partner relationship stays. How it's implemented, whether it's an MOU, a contract, or whatever, is an administrative issue that I agree with David. I think it'd still be better for the board to have notice of it. But that's a different question than at least I'm raising, I think. Brad did.
So let me hear you, because I think we're kind of on the same page, I guess. So if the department had written this to say we recommend continuation of, well, I'm not sure we didn't, but if we recommend continuation of the lead partner, then the funding issues that we need to work out and the actual contractual or MOU then would just be something the department just does knowing where the funding is coming from. Is that what you're saying? Because I think we're saying the same thing. I think we're saying the same thing,
We may
David.
be, but the words here say discontinue, and I.
Correct, and the only reason
Word
we
serious.
said that is because the current contract that we have has a very specific amount of money in it that now is not needed. So we can word it in the motion any way that makes it right. I think we're saying different things.
I think we're saying
I
continuing the
guess-
partnership, but discontinue.
But we write the
But the
contract in
contract
order
is
to do that.
expired.
And I'm just reacting to what I'm seeing here. I just want to make sure that in saying yes to what you're recommending, we're not removing our responsibility under
No.
2031-94,
No.
which said we're responsible to oversee this.
So if it needs to say, if the motion needs to say later that we are recommending continuation of lead partners, these two things, then the department, knowing that funding's coming through another mechanism, though that contract is altered and changed and, MOUs are written so that we still have the lead partner in place.
Thank you.
I think it's semantics, and I'm fine with semantics. We just need to get it right.
How you respond to the funding flows is a question one step below where I think Brad started.
Correct.
I want to reinforce.
Correct.
So since this is discussion, since there's no
Sure.
action on the table, since we won't be making a decision, all I think Brad was trying to do, and I just want to reinforce it, I guess without a motion, is that we have lead partner relationships with these districts and schools. We have oversight, we have an obligation to see it through to sustainability of the improvements, and we're not letting go of any of that today.
There will be a motion later in this meeting.
Yes.
So the wording of the motion is
Important.
critical, and the board is not going to recommend that the use of lead partners be discontinued. The board is going to recommend that the use of lead partners be continued.
So let's talk about, and the department's in total agreement with that on Voyager and Scholastic. So if we could have a dialogue about the other two, I think that would be great because I think we need to. The first one was TNTP that provided, it's basically provided its work and it's completed. I don't know how better to say that. They did what they needed to do with the teacher evaluation piece and it's now complete. So we don't recommend renewal of that particular piece with George Washington. Then Amplify with George Washington. It did receive a C, is that correct? But in addition, Amplify did not meet all of its goals. It's not proven to be a partner that is of high quality. I don't know how better to say that. And so we are recommending that partnership be discontinued for a couple of reasons. If this, I suppose the board could, in actuality, if we discontinue that partnership, we could then talk about what a partnership would be later, that we could come to this board and actually do a different partnership. But there are questions about the partner itself and the fact that George Washington, through its efforts, was at a C level. So I want to hear your dialogue. That's why I said we really want to talk about this. We want to get the motions right. We want to do what we want to do when we get to the action item.
Madam Superintendent, how long has the intervention with New Teacher Project been in place?
All last year.
Just for the 1 year?
Yeah, and it was for the sole purpose of the evaluations and training of the administrators.
And I think this was pointed out a little bit ago by the superintendent. It was an additional partnership. It wasn't their lead partner per se.
Right, it was not their
It was an
lead partner.
additional professional development
Correct.
part that they
Yeah,
added.
it was not their lead partner at all.
Can I ask a question about the Amplify? What were the measures that led you to conclude that Amplify was an ineffective partner?
We have IPS here to actually speak to George Washington.
Yes.
Oh, there she is.
Thank you.
I'm looking for you.
And
Thanks, Yvonne.
You're welcome.
Hello, I'm Yvonne Rambo. I'm from Indianapolis Public Schools, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
This recommendation is related to George Washington's growth. Can you quantify that?
The recommendation to discontinue the partnership with Wireless, is that what you're specifically referring to?
What has occurred? Up,
The growth
down, or
that-
sideways?
The quantitative growth, the growth on achievement data that we currently have is 2012 data.
What achievement data?
The ECA data, and as well as the ISTEP data,
Which led to your grade of a C.
which led to the grade of the C last fall, when we got our letter grades.
You don't know this year's data.
No, we don't.
Well,
Nobody does.
is that worrisome, though, to make a recommendation without seeing this year's data?
I don't believe this is our recommendation. I believe it's the DOE's recommendation, but we confirmed that that data was accurate and that they had seen growth as a result of many things, not just the lead partner work, but the vast improvements in the community relationships and the partnerships that they have at George Washington, as well as instructional and administrative changes that we've made at the school.
And so what was it about Amplify that did not satisfy their contractual obligation?
I believe that I was not involved in the contract, so I don't know what's in their contract with you, but I can share with you that the movement that was made at George Washington, we could not continue to contribute to the work from Amplify or Wireless at that point. We contributed it to the increased amount of professional development for the teachers. We attributed it to the SIG grant, the Little G grant that they received that allowed the school to extend learning time, to pay teachers for quality professional development with multiple partners. They had other partners when Wireless was directed to intervene at George Washington, and those partners were making great strides in the instructional program.
And I asked earlier if all the lead partners were comfortable with this. Does Amplify agree that the contract renewed?
I guess at this point, it's our recommendation that they haven't fulfilled their obligations. They haven't, through talking to George Washington leadership, they feel like, and to quote, that they were more of a hindrance than they were of help because of the things that Mrs. Rambo just mentioned, that they had other partnerships, other things that were really moving their school forward, and it didn't seem to be a relationship that was beneficial.
Oh, yes, so sorry.
Thank you. Tried to, one of the questions was that let's have a discussion here and put it in context. And not everybody was around for this process. I would say 3 or 4 years ago, we started these chronically failing schools were a big concern. There was 20-some.
Mm-hmm.
And then we hired consultants to go evaluate and help and talk to the superintendents and boards. There was no rush here. It was a lot of time and money expended. We had thousands of young people in schools that by all indications were just, they were not healthy environments. Students were not learning. And then some of them took pretty drastic action and got off the list, and others remained. We decided on a group of schools we would actually take full responsibility for, and then a group of schools we thought would be good to have a lead partner. Mm-hmm. And once we decided to do that, I think we all committed until we saw data that would drive that forward, we would take that responsibility very seriously. One of the continuing themes in these chronically failing schools is they would start and stop. They do this program, that program, 5 programs, 3 programs, new principal, 3 new principals. That principal that would double, we'll do a dual principal, and then I'm just repeating the stories. We went out to these schools and heard the whole thing and went in the neighborhoods. And I continue to bring up, these are very vulnerable neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. These are schools that need to get their reputations back fully. We opened it up and we went down a journey, and I want to make sure that today this comes to me here, and this way we're a little behind in the process. If the MOU does suffice in terms of our responsibility for these schools, we would have to see that in detail and make sure that the data comes. This was a big event for us to go. Nobody wants to go take over school. No one wants to. You want schools to be places where young people thrive and learn. And they clearly, the people that were responsible couldn't pull it off. It needed a big move. So I'd be very careful about this board watering down the intervention as to maybe lose progress. So if we write an MOU, it has to be very tight, so to speak. The other thing is we intervened on some training, and now they're going to do it for the whole district. IPS is a pretty big operation. And focus is part of being successful. So you say, well, they're going to do it for everybody. But not everybody had a record like this. And not everybody lives in that neighborhood where this school has to become successful. So I want to be cautious here and remember our responsibility and how we got here. And not lose sight, not lose focus, not lose measurements. I think we're a little out of order here. I'd like to see, learning's increasing. What caused it to increase? What do we want to keep? How do we make sure it stays there? And so if an MOU replaced contract, I'd need to see, what the specifics, and be assured that that lives up to our responsibility for getting in the middle of this, because we felt compelled to on behalf of the young people. So I don't know if I have an answer for you, but that's, Superintendent asked for our feelings. And how we got here. Those are my favorites.
And I'm in agreement. Right. I'm not in disagreement with any members of the board.
So I wouldn't want to be difficult. If we can modify and make it better, I'll do that. But
I'm kind of hearing some things, if I might, to see if we're headed in the right direction. So I hear a motion to continue lead partners for Voyager and Scholastic, and you're interested in seeing the MOU that results from that. No problem. I hear there's question on the department's end, for sure, and the IPS's end on Amplify being the right partner. So perhaps if we discontinued that one, we could immediately start an RFP to get a new lead partner. That would have a very good focus for what needs to happen at George Washington, to work alongside with their partners in getting that going. We have two, Scholastic seems to have been a very focused partner for Broad Ripple, and might even be a consideration on having some focus area at George Washington. The department is committed totally to being sure that we're going to have what's in place to make things happen. And the new teacher project piece, that really was in addition to Amplify, and it's fulfilled its obligations. So the department still would recommend discontinuing of that contract. And IPS actually has hired them to do their entire district. So they're even broadening it beyond for that particular reason, and George Washington is enfolded within that. So that's kind of what I'm hearing. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that before we get to action. David?
If the recommendation is to discontinue Amplify, I would like to see what the alternative is. You mentioned that maybe we're going to hire a lead partner. If that's the case, I'd like to get information on the lead partner. There's a possibility we might enhance the MOU. I'd like to have a chance, as Dan pointed out, and Brad, to look at that MOU to see if it is indeed as rigorous, if not more rigorous. And so I'm a little nervous today to vote on something to discontinue without the alternative recommended to us.
Let me ask Bernice her advice on how we might continue, because the department doesn't disagree with any of this.
Sure.
So we're wanting to make sure that we're going to have the support pieces in place. So I think we're talking contracts now, with things expiring and things moving on. So Bernice, I don't know if you have any thoughts on what we might do.
To give some factors to help in your discussion, as Danielle said in her presentation, the contracts, all of them expire either at the end of the month or the beginning of September. If the board wanted to, an MOU were acceptable, the work on that and the completion of that could be in place so that when the contracts expire, there is no lapse in supervision.
Oh. Okay.
It would take some shoulder to the grindstone, because there are processes that MOUs have to go through. They have to go through review at the AG's office and things of that nature. But it can be done. I believe that it can be done. So to not do anything could result in a lapse. I'm just throwing it so that you know, it could result in a lapse. In terms of an RFP to look for someone to replace Amplify, that's a process that could be started relatively soon through IDOA. And I think that could be done relatively quickly as well through the RFP process with IDOA to replace Amplify, if that's what the board would consider.
I guess it's my sense, I hear my colleagues saying that we want to review it from a policy perspective before it's implemented. And I understand the timeline constraints. However, as one member of the board, I would be really uncomfortable discontinuing a contract would have nothing else or no plan in place.
Do we want to have another meeting just to do this item? I mean, we're in the same bind you are, literally.
Well, if we have
So-
another meeting, that means that we would need to have the MOU or a recommendation on a new vendor by the end of this month. Is that something that the Department of Ed could do?
That's why I thought I was saying, certainly an MOU would be available for
I'm not
review.
sure if the RFP process could be that quick, though.
Correct.
Yeah,
But
that
an
would
MOU could be completed within
Oh,
what
yes.
time frame? Few weeks?
A few weeks, well, for review, it can be done rather quickly, because as I shared, the MOU will use the exhibits attached to the contract.
Correct.
That's the basis that my staff will be working from. So that for review can be done very quickly. Moving it through the process.
I understand. I'll stop and let my colleagues respond.
What would the time frame be to find a replacement?
So
Does
the,
that take a month, or 2 months to?
so the RFP process, in terms of, I hope let me know if I'm not answering your question. So that call out to people to make proposals, I think can move rather quickly. I think there are avenues that perhaps it can be done in less than 30 days, but I'm not certain of that.
And Bernice, if I might add, and I don't want to enter into this conversation about the new schools coming on board, but the RFP process has already been drafted
Yes.
for the next schools. So technically, that same RFP process is asking for lead partners
Sure.
for our new on-board coming school.
And we've
So we
already
probably could
asked, we've already begun that process. Thank you, Danielle.
So
for
that might
bringing
speed up a
that
little bit.
So we have begun an RFP process in anticipation of new schools perhaps needing lead partners.
Correct.
So thank you so much. I had forgotten that we already started that process.
Is an RFP required for a lead partner, or could conceivably
is.
IUPUI slide in?
Because of the dollar
is.
amounts, it's
It
required
is.
legally.
Would it be possible to leave that, if we don't have a new lead partner selected, would it be possible to leave theirs intact with a 15-day extension or a 20-day extension until there is a replacement in place?
I don't know if the
Or an
contract.
annual contract? I don't know.
I don't know if it permits small renewals like that. I can get back to you and answer, but off the top of my head, I don't think so. I think they're annual blocks, but I can look and get back to you.
And I guess I would ask, would it please, in summary, could the recommend, and again, I don't know Robert's rule as well as I should, could the recommendation be, though, that the MOUs would be acceptable if all elements that are in the current contracts are continued in just a new format, to avoid this timeline and lapse?
If I might ask a question of Yvonne from IPS. Yvonne, with wireless and Amplify, do your schools, are there schools already using the data devices and things through wireless, or was that part of the contract? Because are they already using the data and using the information?
That was not part of the original contract, I believe, with the State Department. That was not a part of the
Correct.
services or the deliverables.
Okay.
Theirs was more of a professional development service that they were
Okay.
offering and that they were asked to offer to George Washington at that time. So we already have our own data systems and data collection systems in place that we continue to use. And I do believe we use a wireless product in the district already with Dibbles, but not at George Washington specifically.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify because wireless, really, its main focus
Exactly.
really deals with the data pieces that schools use. So George Washington wasn't using any of the data pieces.
No, the
Okay.
main focus of that work and the scope of that work was a much broader focus, with professional development being
Sure.
the center and the
Sure.
showcase of that work.
Sure.
belabor a couple of points. One is, I would not vote for any change in the status of our intervening as a board in any of these schools at this time. That's the question of whether we have a direct relationship on an intervention basis. So I'd take the word intervene out of all your recommendations. The second is, it would be helpful to have evidence to base decisions on. And the word growth is in here, but we don't have 2012-13 ISTEP scores back. We don't have any factual basis on which evidence-based decisions could be made.